some people have asked, well, how did you end up going from the college to the high school? Well, what happens is that both positions are essentially needed. So for 16 years, I taught at the university level. I started, as Dr. Barnes said, I started at Morris Brown College. And Morris Brown, believe it or not, had a lot of the same issues that I hear you speaking of today. But the awesome thing about you all is that you're confronting the issues so that you can conquer them. You know, because that's always the first step. Because a lot of times we continue an issue and we think, well, this is the culture, this is the tradition, this is how we've been doing things. And that inability to change, that fixed mindset, is what really is killing a lot of our schools, and they're very much needed. They're very much needed. After leaving Morris Brown, I taught for 7 years at Clark Atlanta University. Then I left Clark Atlanta for a position at Fort Valley State University, which is a lot like Cheyney. And then I left Fort Valley State University to go teach at Spelman College. So my HBCU experience is very vast, and I graduated from the Tennessee State University. If you cut me, I bleed blue. So, you know, so my HBCU experience is vast, and I took that information and that knowledge from teaching at the collegiate level to work with young people who didn't do well in traditional high schools, but still to empower them to know that it is possible for them to go to college, right? Because one of the marvelous things about our HBCUs, and I completely understand what the brother was saying when he talked about the admissions policies and how they have to be changed. But one of the marvelous things about our institutions is that sometimes we get that lump of coal and mold it into a diamond. You know, forgive me if I go into my Baptist preaching mode because I'm a church girl, okay? Is everybody all right? Yeah. Okay, all right. So today I'm going to be like a mini skirt. I'm going to be short enough to cover the good stuff, but long enough to keep you interested and so you retain some. You got it? Okay. So the PowerPoint that I gave, the thing that I'm going to talk to you about is the issue of cultural relevance. Cultural relevance, a lot of times for a lot of educators, can be a touchy topic because for many educators, they think cultural relevance means that if I'm teaching black kids, I got to teach black information. I got to teach about black studies. If I'm teaching Latino kids, I got to teach Latino studies. Not true. Cultural relevance, creating a culturally relevant classroom simply means that, number one, I build relationships with the students that I work with. Number two, I'm cognizant of their lived experience because I understand that lived experience is going to affect the ways in which they learn. Number three, I also make sure that I have an interactive dialogue with my students because a lot of times when we get to the college level, some of us are very set in our ways and we think it's lecture, you listen, you take notes, and you move forward. But what we do is we make sure that we have an interactive community instead of teacher-students, because I was speaking with my friend up top who introduced herself and walked me around the campus, but one of the issues is that a lot of times educators, especially professors, we see it as us and them. But what happens if learning is truly to occur, then it needs to be we. Because what we're doing is we're in the business of training future scholars. They're scholars in training. And so we have to approach it as such. So the first thing I want to do is I want to provide for you a definition of what cultural relevance is. Culturally relevant teaching or responsive teaching is a pedagogy grounded in teachers displaying cultural competence. Let me give you an example. I was talking to someone and they talked about how a lot of times we don't even understand how our specific upbringing can cause us to have different biases or different beliefs that may not be true, but they're still very effectual in the way that we interact with our students. Can I give you an example? Yep. I was tell me your name again? Jolly? Okay. I was telling Jolly about when I taught at Clark Atlanta, the great majority of my students were from the tri-state area. They were from New York, a lot of them were from Philly, and a lot of them from the DC, this little cluster of places, because we did heavy recruiting in those areas. And so when I would teach, they would say, instead of referring to me as Professor Hall, they would say, yo, miss, yo, mom. Now, initially, I thought that was gravely disrespectful, because I'm a Southern girl. We say yes ma'am, no ma'am, or excuse me, Professor Hall, Miss Hall, whatever the moniker was at that time. But what I had to learn is that because immediately I had created a bias in my mind about how this particular set of students was. But because of my engagement with the students and because of my interaction, it allowed me to know that for them, this was a term of endearment and wasn't necessarily a term of disrespect. And so now, because I know how they speak, because every region has its own particular sort of vernacular or speech pattern, right? And so what may be disrespectful to one person may be a term of endearment to another person. I'll give you an example. A lot of people from up north think yes ma'am, no ma'am is a very bad thing. Well, it means that you're an old person if somebody says yes ma'am, no ma'am to you. And for us, it simply is a term of respect to show I respect who you are and where you are. But what happens is that without us knowing our students, without us being knowledgeable of their cultural backgrounds or who they are and what they came from, we immediately have a disconnect. And it's hard to teach people that you're disconnected from. Can I get an amen on that one? It's very, very hard to teach people that you're disconnected from. The next thing I want to talk to you about is why is it important for us to have, I don't know if I can make this bigger. Yes, I can. No? Is that a search button or a mic? Okay. Why is it important for us to make a culturally relevant classroom? One of the first things that it does is it improves the academic achievement of our students. But we have to be open. In speaking or listening to you guys, some of the issues that Cheyney's been going through and listening to some of the things that you're talking about, one issue that we got to confront at all of our HBCUs and college in general is this issue of having a fixed mindset, this idea of traditionalism. This is the way we've done it. This is the way we're going to continue to do it. It's worked for us thus far, but it's not worked. And things are going to continue to get worse, not just at our HBCUs, but at our brick and mortar institutions, period, because believe it or not, these proprietary institutions are catering to students in every way possible. If you want to use your work experience as part of your credits, you can do that. If you want to test out of classes so that you don't have to take certain classes, you can do that. So they're thinking of every way possible to get the students that we once used to be able to attain. So one of the things we've got to do is we've got to realize that we've got to have a growth mindset, and that means that we've got to do some things differently. And so in our classes, we really have to think about ways to connect to our students and ways to engage our students. That does not mean that we're going to have to water information down. It does not mean that we have to acquiesce to their demands, but it does mean that in addition to raising the bar, I'm taking into consideration some of the things that they know, some of the things that they don't know, and I'm trying to meet them where they are so that I can take them where I want them to go. Everybody still on board? Okay, so if I were to ask you a question, what are some things that you're doing in your classroom right now? And I'm going to make sure I only take 2 or 3 because as educators, we can be quite loquacious. So I'll keep them short. So tell me, what are some of the things you're doing in your class now to engage or connect with your students?
Right away, opening class, while I take roll, I play some recent music, you know, hip hop, whatever it is, smile, whatever, to kind of engage them, and then open with a discussion on stuff in the news, you know, be it health psychology or whatever it is, to get them to open up and contribute right from get-go.
Okay, very good, very good. Somebody else, tell me something else that you think you're doing in your class that connects them or engages them. Yes, sir.
Sometimes challenging them with certain questions during the class, and if somebody answered the question correctly, I give them points. Like 2, 5 points if the question is hard enough. And to encourage them to study, to read outside the book, to have general knowledge about the subject. Not just come in here and just look at the slides and just listen to what I'm doing. They have to have general knowledge in the subject.
Okay.
And I encourage them to learn extra points on it.
Okay. Well, one